and today I'm your MC for today's event. Thank you so much for making the time if you're here live today. If you're watching the recording, thank you for taking some time to watch the recording. We got a lot in store for you today, and we got a great panel assembled here to talk about today's topic, which is all around acquisitions, buying and selling small businesses, particularly for veterans who want to buy or sell a small business. And that's really the topic of today. That is the focus of our program called Pass the Guidon, and you're going to learn all about that today. So these are the topics we're going to cover today, but in no particular order. We're going to talk about the opportunity for transferring ownership between sellers and buyers, pretty self-explanatory, but really the slant of a veteran doing that, either on the buy side or the sell side. Part of that's going to be what owners do about leaving a legacy. You know, you spent years growing value and growing something called a small business. At some point, there's a reason to exit that business. We'll talk about that today. But how do we actually leave a legacy so that what we spent years building doesn't kind of dissipate pretty quickly, which happens a lot. Specifically, we're going to touch on the importance of being knowledgeable about veteran-owned and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses in terms of active businesses that fall into those categories that sell to the government, and really a unique challenge that exists in the country today to take those existing companies and transfer ownership to younger veterans coming up who are looking to buy businesses, and the great opportunity that's there. There's a lot to cover and unpack in that particular topic, and we have a panelist that's kind of an expert in that area today to cover that. Really, some of the DNA that we leave the military with, no matter what branch you served in, if you were an NCO or an officer and have experience leading, that DNA and experience is invaluable when it comes to business in general, but particularly being a small business leader. And we're going to touch on that as well. We're also going to cover the acquisition process at a very high level, the wave tops, just to cover the basics of what that actually looks like. Because many sellers don't actually know what that looks like, and we'll get into that reality and challenge a little later on. We're sponsored by JPMorgan Chase. This event is sponsored by JPMorgan Chase. They've been very generous to us, not only with a few bucks, but with their time. And we have a couple of professionals from JPMorgan Chase with us today that are also veterans, and I'm just pleased that they're here, and they've been wonderful to work with. And so it's been a joint effort to put this event together, and we hope you enjoy it. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce the panel here. And what we have is an esteemed group of people. And of course, I'll start with the smartest one. So Shim, over to you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. My name is Shim Moik. I am a commercial banker at JPMorgan Chase, based in Raleigh, North Carolina. In my role, I provide advisory services to middle market companies to help them achieve their long-term objectives and also streamline their financial and banking needs, whether it's cash management, commercial card, 401k benchmarking, and everything in between. I am also the head of diverse businesses in the Carolinas. So that includes minority-owned businesses, women-owned, veteran-owned, and also LGBTQ plus owned businesses. And that particular job is really my passion job, where I get to merge my two careers as a commercial banker and also as a former Army officer. So as I alluded to before JPMorgan Chase, I was in the Army for about 5.5 years. I commissioned from West Point as a military intelligence officer. Loved my experience. I was stationed in Germany and South Korea, got to travel the world. And when I ETS'd in 2019, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. Luckily, I joined JPMorgan Chase through their Military Pathways Rotational Program, which is a fantastic program for any transitioning veteran. And here I am today as a commercial banker in North Carolina. So I'm very grateful to be here today and to provide a little insight from the lens of a commercial bank. So with that, I'll kick it over to Sid.
Thanks. Mike, if you would, could you just take over momentarily? I got to check something. Just kind of keep going. Thanks.
Well, great. Thank you, Shim. Really appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. So happy to be here today And a huge thank you to John and the other panelists here who have made tremendous efforts to support transitioning veterans and support this ecosystem. As a Navy veteran, this is something I care deeply about, and I'm honored to be able to provide my insight and perspective that hopefully is helpful for you today. So from Raleigh, North Carolina, went to Duke, did ROTC there, and spent 7 years as a Navy surface warfare and search and rescue swimmer. Went to business school, and then have been in the private banking industry for almost a decade of advising and guiding entrepreneurs who are looking to sell their business and also looking to acquire a business, and really trying to maximize the alpha of their personal balance sheet. And so I think it's really important when you're joining a virtual call like this to be able to have a few key takeaways that I think are relevant for the individuals on this call, whether if you're looking to acquire a company or you're considering selling your company. I think there are specific things here that I can provide that will be incredibly helpful for you today. So if we're able to share a few of those slides, I can kind of dive into a few of those topics. Let's see here. Maybe I can pull it up. Right. Okay. So as I mentioned, private wealth banker at JP Morgan. The talking points I wanted to quickly address today is focused on estate planning, qualified small business stock, and then there are some key questions for entrepreneurs that you should be asking yourself as you're going through this process. So kind of just diving into it. So one of the things that we are trying to do as a wealth advisor is trying to understand the intent behind wealth and the intent behind your wealth. And to be honest with you, majority of people, it's different. But during the course of your lifetime, your money can go to 4 different areas. You can spend it yourself, you can give it to friends and family, you can donate it to charity, and you can give it to Uncle Sam. Typically, the individuals I work with try to limit that bottom right-hand corner as much as they can, and we try to deliver the appropriate solution to minimize that, minimize the amount of that they're paying in taxes, and to maximize the dollar of the other pathways that they're trying to direct their funds. So how you do that is through proper trust and estate planning. So this slide here, I think, is an incredibly powerful slide, and John will be able to send out this information afterwards. But this is kind of the foundations of a sound trust and estate plan. So at the very bottom in the navy blue, these are the things that everyone on this call should have checked off. So making sure retirement account contributions are accounted for correctly, having a power of attorney, having a living will, healthcare proxy, HIPAA form, having a will, and having a revocable trust. Cannot emphasize that. You'd be amazed at how many entrepreneurs that we work with that don't even have a will in place. Proper beneficiary designations. Typically, I mean, every single individual is going to have a major life event that will impact these trust and estate documents. They get married, they get divorced, they have an individual that they've assigned as a trustee that is no longer can serve in that capacity. That's why we recommend reviewing these documents every 2 years, and at a bare minimum, having them in place to ensure that the intent behind your wealth and what you want those assets to do is accurately reflected in these documents. Proper account titling is also an important consideration, and it's tangentially related to qualified small business stock, which I'll talk about briefly. But again, this is a great representation of things that you can do today as an entrepreneur that will save you so much heartache. If you go to the top portion of this pyramid, now these are the things you can do to be able to maximize the the overall impact of your wealth. So whether that be charitable contributions, trying to limit the after-tax exposure that you have, and there's wonderful trust and estate planning techniques that you can utilize to be able to do that. All of that really stems on the fact that every individual has what's called a lifetime gift exclusion. Right now, it's around 13 million per individual, or 26 million for a couple. Anything that you gift beyond that is taxed in what is called an estate tax at 40%. It's a sizable amount that's taxed by the federal government. And so what we do with entrepreneurs is let's understand what you're trying to do with your wealth and then put in the correct trust and estate planning techniques to be able to limit that impact and the amount of taxation that's happening. So as I mentioned, there's hopefully 2 to 3 really good takeaways to take from this. I think this is one of them. And I think the other one is qualified small business stock. And I'm also amazed with the amount of entrepreneurs that Shim and I work with on a daily basis who are completely unaware of what this is. So QSBS, as it's referred to, it is the best tax benefit for entrepreneurs. And so essentially what this is it allows you to have up to $10 million of capital gains exclusion from the sale of your company stock. So either you're selling that on a private deal or you're selling it to a company that you've taken to IPO, this is still a IRS benefit you're eligible for. There are certain requirements associated with QSBS, and I'll just quickly cover that. And I encourage you to be able to look through the presentation that John will send out after this, which is a full breakdown of what QSBS is. But essentially, if you are a company, private, that is less than $50 million in gross assets, and your administered shares. So founders shares count. If you're an investor in another company, that company has to be a C Corp, less than 50 million in gross assets. And you have to have those shares for 5 years. If you hold it for 5 years, then you are eligible whenever you do sell those shares, you're eligible for this capital gains exclusion. So that's sizable when you look at, some of the, when an individual is selling their company hundreds of millions of dollars, that's a sizable tax benefit. It has to be a C Corp. So I mentioned titling of your entity and assets is important. It has to be a C Corp. So I think a big consideration for entrepreneurs when they're going through is, should we operate as an LLC? Should we operate as an S Corp or a C Corp? This is a great incentive to be structured as a C Corp. So a great reminder there. There are certain requirements on the type of business that you have to be. For the most part, if you're a product delivery company, the only exceptions we've typically have seen that are not eligible are law firms or medical practices or like an alcohol distributor company. But typically, if your company is creating a product, that is going to count. But make sure that you're consulting with your tax advisor to ensure that you qualify for that. The last thing I would say on QSBS is that there is a transferable element to it, which is incredibly helpful. So hypothetically, you start a company and then within 3 years, this company is designated as QSBS, but you need to sell. There is a transferability process with this where you can hold on to your holding basis. So if you've held any QSBS share for 6 months, and you sell, you can transfer those interests into another QSBS within 60 days and maintain your holding period. So if you're at 4 years, you sell, you have 60 days to put those proceeds into another QSBS and you maintain your timeline. A lot of entrepreneurs also make this mistake. And so just an important consideration. So hopefully this has been helpful in terms of how within broader wealth management, we think through the things that we're trying to do for entrepreneurs and how we think through maximizing the overall after-tax dollars that they have, and also trying to help them make great decisions pre and post a liquidity event. Yep. So with that, John, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Sid. That is great stuff. We talked about earlier, we'll get to that later. But if you're a seller and you don't know about this, absolutely should do a deep dive into it and understand it, because it has all the benefits that Sid just mentioned. So, John Mahoney, why don't we start with you? A little bit about yourself and where you're coming from and why you're here today.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. Great to be with everyone. My name's John Mahoney. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I was an infantry officer from 2007 to 2012, and I've taken a winding path since then, which has led me to become the CEO of Bailey Heating and Air in East Tennessee. And that was through the path of entrepreneurship through acquisition. So after leaving the Marine Corps, I got some experience at some tech startups and realized I wanted to go get my MBA. So I spent 2 years getting my MBA before joining McKinsey as a consultant in Charlotte. And after that, I decided I wanted to help veterans get elected to political office. So was working in the political sphere until about 2019 and decided that I want to get back to entrepreneurship, but wasn't sure what path to take. And I eventually, through helping the Small Business Administration during the pandemic kicking off with the relief loans that they had, I realized how many retiring owners there are in our country and how they need to transition their businesses, and especially how that retiring owner cohort has a massive overrepresentation of Vietnam era veterans who've been very successful at entrepreneurship and establishing their own companies. So I actually started Change of Command to partner with those retiring Vietnam era veterans as they were thinking about transitioning ownership of their small business. And along the way, through these conversations with these Vietnam era vets, since I was talking about jobs and long-term growth, I actually decided to start my own search through the self-funded search model to try and acquire a company through partnership with a retiring owner. So in early 2023, I was able, through an SBA 7A loan, which is a very common tool for entrepreneurship acquisition, was able to take ownership of Bailey Heating and Air. And we have a team of 14 here in East Tennessee, specifically focused on residential HVAC. And it's been an incredible year that's really brought back into my life all the things that I loved in the Marine Corps about camaraderie and teamwork and having a mission and building a culture. And the first acquisition of Bailey Heating and Air is part of a larger vision called Change of Command to build a holding company of home services company, specifically in Tennessee and the Mid-South. And hopefully can hire a lot of veterans, and along the way speak to many veterans who are thinking about this path as well, because I think it's an amazing path for veterans to take who have incredible leadership experience. And I hope that many more veterans pursue this and to be helpful to them, just like so many veterans were to me along the way. So thank you again for having me.
Thanks, John. And we haven't known each other that well, but I think it was kind of like you had me at hello when we started to talk about this stuff. And great that we're mission aligned there. Thank you for being here today. My good friend, Mike Horn. Mike, the stage is yours. I hate when I say that because I have to duck and not knowing what's going to come out of your mouth, but please.
I know it scares you, John, and that's okay. It's all right to be afraid. My name is Mike Horn. I entered the Army in 1973. I retired in 1994. After I retired from the Army, I wandered aimlessly for 10 years, and I worked for a logistics company. I worked for a bank. I worked for a software development company. And while I was working at the software development company, it had very poor leadership and was just not a great company to work for. So I was eventually downsized. And at that point in 2006, I took the opportunity to buy an existing company, a manufacturing company. And that company had been around since the 70s. When I bought the company, it was doing about $400,000 in revenue a year. Now we typically do 2 to 3 million a year. We've done up to 20 million a year. But what I decided to do was to take the company and move it in a different direction. And the direction that we moved in was federal, state, and local government contracting. We manufacture a lot of different products for the government. We have thousands of vehicles on the road throughout the world. And we're pretty proud of all of the equipment that is out there, the equipment that comes back to us every 15 or 20 years that we refurbish. And I was an infantryman, a mechanized infantryman. So I dealt with tanks and tracks and Bradleys, and that's what I knew about. And so that's why I got into the vehicle and equipment manufacturing business. And I'm just so pleased to be in this business and to support other veteran-owned businesses, because I have a lot of vendors, a lot of suppliers, and I try very hard to track down veteran-owned or service-disabled veteran-owned businesses to be my suppliers. And along with John, we co-founded Vet the CEO, and I am dedicated to helping other veterans get into business, because I know that if I can do it as an infantryman, anyone else can do it also. So that's my story, John. And if there's anything you want to ask me, go for it, or I'll turn it over to our good friend, Rob.
All right, here we go. Rob Campbell, Army veteran, served in the infantry for 27 plus years, joined in 1990 out of college, Massachusetts native, and traveled a career path as an officer, rose to the rank of colonel, and commanded a brigade in the 101st Airborne Division. Great privilege to do that. In 2016, my path and the Army's path had started to diverge, and I retired. John has asked me to speak a bit more, so I'm going to stay on stage and hold on to the mic. And I'm going to tell you some stories of my journey, because now I am a multi-business owner here in Johnson City, Tennessee, and the path that took me to that place I'm in today since 2016. So I'll tell some stories, and I'm gonna share some lessons that I learned along the way, because I've screwed up a bunch of stuff, and but it's been a wonderful journey of growth and development. So in fall of 16, I transitioned out of the military, and not a clue what I wanted to do. I had a sense of what I was passionate about, that being leadership, investing in people, things like that. I just needed to find a place to fulfill that passion. You know, I had a keen sense of my why when I transitioned. Most veterans don't do that, and we don't ask the right questions. Hey, Rob, thanks for your service. What do you want to do? It really is, who are you? Well, I was fortunate to have a good sense of that. Now, I decided to take a year off after transition to kind of close out a major chapter in my life. My wife went and taught school for a year, and I just kind of, took some time to figure things out. Wrote a book in spring of 17, shortly after my retirement, on leadership, and really discovered my passion for writing, working on book 3 now. And it was during that time that I decided, okay, I could sell this. I could speak, coach, teach off of this book. This book could be a big business card for me. And so I jumped into it, entrepreneurship with both feet, not a clue what I was doing. I took the gateway drug, and this is what the gateway drug is. I got a tax ID, a website, and a business card, and poof, I'm in business, right? I saddled up this resume of mine and rode this right into entrepreneurship, thinking that they would line up at my door, checks in hand. Hey man, I want some of what this guy's got, right? Because I'm a combat veteran. I'm pretty badass. You know, Army Ranger, paratrooper. I could deliver a lot to private businesses, but I had no idea what I was doing. I took that gateway drug, and my wife and I celebrated. Spring of 17. First client, January of 18. It took me that long to get someone to write me a check. I had to work for somebody for free for 90 days. Army Brigade Commander for free for 90 days for a small fence company, just to show them what I could do. They became my client eventually. But there were a lot of things I just didn't know about private business, money, the value proposition. What am I selling? Why would a private business, pay me money to do what I do? Because they're going to want to see that return on the other end. So I started Investing in People Consulting and Coaching LLC. What a stupid name. I don't know what I was thinking. I just kind of went with Rob Campbell Leadership because that became my website. I have since changed the name. But that was the start of my journey in entrepreneurship, not knowing what I was doing. Lessons learned. I needed an education. I needed help. And look, I could command a brigade all day long. I could lead with the best of them. But when it came to private business, no experience there, none. And so I really needed that help. I needed to get an education and get some assistance. Exit planning. Start with the exit in mind. What? I had no idea what that meant. I just started a business. We don't start with the exit in mind in the Army. There is no exit. Our business is going forever. I didn't understand money. there wasn't a dollar sign on any slide deck I ever looked at as a commander. Certainly, I had my military budget. I was a good steward of that, but money was not an issue in the military. And it was foremost in the military. Business operating systems, different things like that, CRMs, how do you close it, how do you get them into the funnel? None of this stuff I really knew how to do. Well, I had the good fortune. I spoke in Wilmington, North Carolina once, and that's where John Panachone forced himself upon me. And we struck up a friendship. And foolishly, he asked that I join the Vet to CEO team to be the executive director. And so I did. And man, what an eye-opening experience it was for me. That's where I really learned entrepreneurship, cut my teeth, if you will, in this LLC that I had. I learned a lot of things out of Vet to CEO. It really exposed me to the other paths that we don't talk about in entrepreneurship. It's all we talk about is startup. Everything is startup. I would never do a startup again. It was just crazy, difficult. But that's all we talk about. The other two paths were buy existing and franchise. And I got a great exposure to that in Vet to CEO. I got to understand what a business model is. How does the cash flow through a business? How does it work? How does it function? How do you get funding? All these different kind of things. It really helped me as I sat through course after course and learning, how do you run a business? How do you buy a business? How do you start it up? And so Rob Campbell Leadership started to gain some traction. And I kind of discovered it was more of a lifestyle business for me. I stop and it stops, and that's okay. I'm not going to scale and sell this thing someday. I'm just going to have fun with it and make some money along the way. But I wanted something more. I wanted another mountain to climb. I wanted to get some people around me. So I started looking at other businesses to buy. I found an HVAC company down in South Carolina, and I got pretty serious about it. But I stopped because I had an awakening, a few of them that was like, okay, it was very tied to the person who owned it. And I would have had to come in to replace that name, right? This Massachusetts Yankee coming to the coast of South Carolina. I didn't speak Gullah, right? So there was a steep mountain to climb to take that over. And here's the other thing. I would have had to been HVAC qualified, because to rely on an employee to be that, which I have to have in a business, would be risky, because if that person left, I'm done. Well, I don't fix things. I tried working on my Humvee once. The sergeants chased me out of the motor pool. It's not my thing. I'm just not talented in that respect. And so I kind of slipped away from that. My wife and I decided to move to the Southern Appalachians in Tennessee, just over the border from North Carolina and Asheville. And so we live now in Johnson City, and I was still kind of pursuing this. I discovered a franchise, which is a mobile car wash. Really great business model. I thought, wow, this could be a big deal. Just how they laid it out. Spent some time looking at it. But I didn't go for it because it was very startup-like. I would have had to buy the building and everything, and the initial investment, it was just too much to kind of take on. And the big thing for me was I would be one person removed from having to wash a car. I'm sorry. My ego is just too big. John threatened that he would film me washing a car. Brigade commander out there with a sponge in his hand. So I didn't do that. I got a hold of a business broker in Johnson City, Tennessee. I said, hey, I'm interested, looking at the trades, they're kind of recession proof. He introduced me to a window fashion company. Hadn't thought of that. I said, yeah, sure, I'll take a look at it. Why not? So I came down the hill one afternoon in June of 21, and I walked into the door of All About Blinds Window Fashions. That right there. Instantly impressed. They were selling the building and the property. They were selling the business, and it also had a custom picture framing shop in the building. Now, my wife's an artist. She has an art business. And so what a great fit for her to bring a gallery and do the custom picture framing. And I got to talking with the owners. I'm like, hey, look, I don't know much about window fashions. And they laughed at me and said, yeah, we didn't either. But they were running a thriving business, and there was great potential for growth. And so I took a serious look at this and said, yeah, this I think could work. But it wasn't as simple as just the cash flow, the business model, and say, yeah, this is a fit. It really was a decision matrix, a deck mat. I had to lay it out. Okay, why this? Because this is a massive anchor to drop. When I commit to this, that means we're not moving. That means we're stuck with this thing. But it was a lot of things for me as I looked at it. I like the business. We are open from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. I don't deal with stuff at 9 o'clock at night. I'm not open on weekends. It's quality of life that I want. I don't want this thing to consume me. I've had my days, believe me. But as I laid this out and looked at it, it was good. And I like the product. If you're in the home improvement space right now and you're not doing well, there's something wrong. But so I laid that out, and of course turned back to my mentors, Mike and John. I say, I'm serious about this. I'd like some help. John became my mentor in this thing, and one of the things he recommended was to form a team as I put a deal together, and that team was him as a business coach, an accountant, who I found a great lady here locally that just didn't charge me and helped me out tremendously, and then of course a lawyer. Of course, I had to pay the lawyer. But yeah, that was the team that I put together to make an offer to All About Blinds, and I decided to go the SBA route. And you want to talk about ass pain? Now, look, I understand. I don't want to be critical of banks. I know that we are a risk. I'm a risk. How does a bank know that I'm going to lead this business, successfully, not drive it into the ground? So I understand it all. But the SBA had a good rate. I worked with a guy that understood veterans a little bit, but I kept score. There was 21 new people I met in the journey of this SBA loan. It took several months, but every Monday it'd be a new person and a new checklist, and all the stuff I had to go through. John and I were joking once. Nobody stopped me on the way to Afghanistan when I was taking my brigade there, and said, "Stop. Can I see? I need a credit check first." Well, wait a minute. You only got a 690. Back to base, right? None of that happened, but here I am now in this new space as an entrepreneur, as an Army colonel, and having to just, all right, what do you need? Here it is. I actually gave blood, no kidding, in this room right here. A nurse came in because I had to get a life insurance policy for the SBA loan, and she took blood. I think I had to pee in a cup too. It was just, it was an experience. And it wore me down, I have to admit. And I got to the point where I was just taking the path of least resistance. I needed an insurance policy. So I get a hold of the insurance companies. Okay, what would you like? I said, this is what the bank tells me I need. Just write this policy and tell me where to send the check. Okay, I don't have time. But I mean, really, I got into that mode as I was putting a deal together to buy the business. But I got through it. And you have to, because what happened on the other end has been real magic for the last couple of years. Let me inject some lessons learned in that, in this thing, and kind of looking at a business and wanting to buy a business. It's more than just the dollar sign. Yeah, you can look at crystal clear and see that tangible thing called money, but there's intangibles, and John's going to talk about that in a little bit. But the intangible was a chance to build a team around me, a business I kind of liked. I'm not, it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to do something I hate every day. No, all of that came into play. My wife and I deciding on all of this, exit planning. How do I sell this someday? Is there potential for growth? All of these things, I really had to sit down and lay it out and think about the tangibles and intangibles before I said, yes, let's do this. So it's really important. And then, of course, the SBA is it's just the way it is. It's a government backed loan, so you have to do what you got to do there. But anyway, all right. So here we go. January of 2022. I think it was January 8th. It was a Monday morning, and I'm the fresh business owner. Closed it on Friday. Took the tape measure from the old boss. Now it's mine. And here we are, right in the middle of a snowstorm, and one of my vans gets stuck, and I got a customer pulling me out of the snow, and then I got an employee that goes down with COVID that week. Okay. All right, so what do we do about it? Well, that was why military training came in as a problem. Okay, let's problem solve. Let's adapt. Let's adjust fire here, and navigate through. And we got through it. And it was that problem solving that I had been so well trained in that I put into place. Summer of 2022, spent way too much money. I dumped a lot into advertising because I saw the value of it, and but I spent way too much, and we got kind of risky a little bit where we never missed payroll. We were probably late on a few payments, but the cash flow was not very healthy because I just didn't understand that, and I needed some coaching through that. We had a break-in one night, a window fashion company. Who breaks into a window fashion company? Sure enough, the night they break in, I got $2,000 in cash sitting in my drawer. Never found them, probably won't ever, but just little things like that. I'm like, oh my God, no, it's not going to end. We're going to get through this. We got a good good team and a good vision. And so we've navigated this space here in All About Blinds. Had a great first year, met my revenue goals. It's been great this year, but it's been very slow in this period in the fall. And we're in a sales business. If I'm not selling, this thing dries up. And so, it's an aspect of the business here that I've got to watch. But we're about to enter in, obviously, in January of 24. I'll have a good 2 years under my belt. I was in a motorcycle accident in August of this year, and I got knocked out. I don't remember the accident. I was flown to the hospital. Fortunately, I was wearing my gear and everything's all right. I broke a rib, a shoulder, a nose, but I came through it. But I had a strong team that I set up from my military training, and that could run this organization without me, and they did exactly that. So it was all this stuff I learned as a veteran, some of the intangibles that I brought into All About Blinds, along with the tangibles of watching the money. Let me enter some lessons learned on this one. Cash flow, really important. I think the thing that I tell a lot of young aspiring business owners or young entrepreneurs is, hey, look, this thing is an infant, this business, All About Blinds. If you're not, caring for this thing all the time, it will react, and it will react negatively. And so you really have to have your thumb on things. That doesn't mean 24/7 sitting here, but it means watching things like cash flow, your expenses, and having the right people on it. All these things that require your personal attention as the business owner, because no one else has that kind of invested interest in doing that. There's a tension between money and people, a payroll and the HR stuff and those things that you do in a business, and giving raises and time off and everything, and then just caring for people. Those two can clash. And so I struggle with that. I'm more of a people guy, but I'm not irresponsible in running the business either. I care about my people deeply, but the business doesn't. It doesn't. My customers don't, nor should they. They want what they want when they come in to see us. So if I've got somebody sick or something else is going on, I've got to compensate for that. Focus on your vision and your strength. Don't focus on your competition. There's a lot of competitors out there. Good for them. They're doing great stuff. Doesn't mean I ignore them, but I focus on who we are and what we're trying to do. And our vision is giving back to the community. And that's a lesson learned is why? Why do we exist? Yeah, sure, I sell and install window fashions, but so what? My grandmother does that. We give back to the community. We serve our people. We serve our community. We serve our customers. And it's this spirit of service that drives us every day on what we do. We give back to the community. So yeah, it's all about blinds, but it's really not all about blinds. It's about having a team around me and really being a true entrepreneur. Last business, and I'll transition back. As I was going through this with All About Blinds, of course, I realized that this is real. This is different from the military. This business here can go away tomorrow if it dries up in a second. And so I looked at building some resiliency in there. Took some money from Big Brother, All About Blinds, and started All About Painting. Bought a van, found a great young guy that had several years experience in painting, and off we went. Started in August, and we're well on our way to making about 100 grand in sales as we close out the year. So it's been great. I'll close on this. One of my biggest awakenings as a business owner is I'm not in the blinds business. I'm not in the leadership business. I'm not in the painting business. I'm in the marketing business. Because I can be great at all that, and I am. But if nobody knows about it, it doesn't matter. I'm in the marketing business. And the last thing is I'm the captain of my own ship. Yeah, I was a brigade commander of a large enterprise. Last night, I've got 3 people around my desk, all tattooed, wearing discs in their ear or whatever they call those gauges. Like, man, my life has changed. But it's wonderful. It's an amazing opportunity to give back to people and help grow them. And I drive home every night, my own boss. I answer to nobody. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, John.
Thanks, Rob. I really appreciate you sharing your story. Lots of good stuff in there. And, ask Rob to tell that story because he's one of us. He's a veteran, and you heard what he went through. He's written 2 books on transitioning out of the military. He's kind of like a resident expert on it. And he, like a good leader, has walked the walk. So he went out and bought a business, and you heard the rest of it. So hopefully many of you that are here live and watching the recording can kind of relate to that, and that you're not alone. And the reason we created Pass the Guidon is to kind of create a magnet that we can all come together as veterans and as people that want to help us in this endeavor of buying a business, or if you're a veteran wanting to sell your business, so that we can help each other. So, Rob, you certainly have done that with your story. I'd like now, we're going to transition a little bit. Shim, are you still there? I'm going to come back to you. And if you could talk a bit about the operational side of the bank that you're responsible for. Sid did a great job talking about one nugget we're going to come back to that's very valuable to sellers of business, and that big tax break he talked about. But I think you work more on the operational side. And if you could just share a few things about that, I would appreciate it. And let me just pull your presentation up here.
Yeah,
There you
absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, listening to, to Rob's story, entrepreneurship really is not for the faint of heart. It's a uphill road. And I think Rob is spot on when he says it's all about having the right team around you and also the right systems and the right operational efficiencies. So over these next few slides, I'm happy to share about JP Morgan Chase, just more of an overview of JP Morgan Chase and specifically how we help businesses. Ultimately, hopefully we can provide a fulsome solution for you so that ultimately you have more time to actually run your business and not worry about your banking and financial needs. So in terms of our culture, our culture stems from the top of our leadership team. And Jamie Dimon, he recognizes that the success of our business depends on the success of our communities. So that is our North Star. As a company, we are driven to really support our communities, support our clients grow and thrive. In terms of where we stand for middle market companies, I think people are surprised to learn that we are actually the #1 primary bank in terms of market share in the middle market. There's a misconception that JP Morgan Chase only banks the largest, public companies, but that cannot be further from the truth. We're also exceptional at smaller businesses, and we're able to do so because of our fortress balance sheet, which basically means that we have a very strong financial picture that can weather economic downturns and support our clients in times of need. And we also invest heavily in technology. So we're able to provide, top tier platforms for our clients. So this is a quick overview of how we're organized at JP Morgan Chase. We are divided into 4 primary lines of businesses. I am in the commercial bank, and as a commercial banker, I work with partners in all other lines of businesses, including the community, consumer and community bank, the corporate and investment bank, and also the asset and wealth management line of business, which the private bank falls under. This is a lot of information. The point is there's a lot that we do at JP Morgan Chase. It is not your job to understand the bank. Rather, it's my job, it's Sid's job as bankers to really, first and foremost, understand your business, understand your personal goals, and secondly, leverage the full resources of the firm to help you achieve your objectives. So I do encourage you to reach out to your JP Morgan Chase banker or to your banker and make sure you are getting the fulsome services that you can tap into. This slide here is to show you that no matter what size business you are, no matter what cycle of your life cycle stage that your business is in, there is a home for you at JP Morgan Chase. We are designed so that no company can outgrow JP Morgan Chase, and we have the tools and resources to help you grow your company to the next tier, the next level. More specifically, here are some tools and resources that we have to help optimize your business. On the treasury services side, we can assist with cash management, as Rob mentioned, keeping track of your inflows and your outflows. Also things like commercial credit cards. In terms of credit market, Rob mentioned the SBA 7A loan. There's also other conventional types of financing as well. We are also top-notch in terms of international capability. So if you need any FX requirements or international accounts, we have a full suite of tools to help you. And ultimately, the intent is that we provide a fulsome solution that grows, that supports your business as it grows, so that you as a business owner have more time to actually run your business and not worry about managing your cash because the operations are already streamlined and efficient. In the interest of time, I'll pass over that slide. Okay, so lastly, JP Morgan Chase, we are dedicated to really supporting veterans and veteran-owned businesses. We're a founding member of the Veteran Jobs Mission. And at JP Morgan Chase specifically, since 2011, we have hired 16,000 veterans and service members, myself and Sid included. So we are very dedicated towards helping transitioning veterans find their next career in the corporate sector. Also, from a supplier diversity standpoint, we spend $89 million annually on veteran-owned businesses. So in terms of being intentional with our spending and our supplier diversity, that's a high priority for us. And the last bullet I do want to highlight is the third bullet on the left. We have curated a program called CEO Circle in partnership with Bunker Labs. It's a year-long training and mentorship program. The current cohort's about 70 veteran CEOs. It's a fantastic program, cannot vouch for it enough. So all in all, there's a lot that we do in this space. There's a lot that we do to support veteran businesses. So I encourage you to reach out to myself. My email is in the speaker bios attached in the shared files, or to your other JP Morgan Chase banker. I think if there's one takeaway from these slides, it's to please be thoughtful about your banking partner, whether it's JP Morgan Chase or another bank. The really great relationships that I've seen are those where the banking partner is an extension of your team and they can provide an ulterior perspective. They can tap into resources in the firm to really help you with your objectives. So with that, I will pass it on over back to you, John.
That's great, Shim. And Chase has been a great partner of ours. And I've worked with a lot of banks over the years. And there's quite a few that frankly help veterans for sure. But JP Morgan Chase clearly walks the walk when it comes to sponsoring events like this and getting the word out on certain topics. So I'd like my board, my panelists to rejoin me. And while they're doing that, a couple things. I actually didn't tell my story. So for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to do that. No, my bio's in the list just like everybody else's, but I've raised capital. I started a business. I sold that business 17 years later. I like to say I had to go get the smile removed from my face by a surgeon after that happened. But whatever could go wrong did go wrong. The same kind of stories Rob told. It all happened to me as well. And I think what got through it was the experience I had in the military. And two confessions. You heard Mike Horn talk about losing his job and had a software company with poor leader. That was me. And I actually whacked him for reasons I can't get into publicly due to legal constraints. But that was one thing. And Rob, I got to confess publicly, man, I'm the one that hit you when you fell off your bike. I know you blacked out, but I can't sleep at night knowing it was me, but I'm glad you're okay. Anyway, so we've got like 3 models that I'm going to use to facilitate a panel discussion. And please, we'll open it up. We've got quite a few attendees here today. Feel free to throw any question in the chat box that you should see in front of you, and we will get to your question. We already had one question that I'd like to address now. That whole qualified small business stock exclusion was a pleasant surprise. When I actually sold my company in 2020, I found out like at the very end when I was finally getting my check, literally months after due diligence and doing this deal with the private equity firm that bought us, my accountant told me about this qualified small business stock exclusion. And it was a really good day for me. Instead of buying my wife a used bicycle I had in mind at the thrift shop, I actually bought her a brand new one because I paid a lot less taxes. And the lesson in that is, unless you really know about that, if you're a small business owner listening to this, you should really look into that because it changes the entire math on how you might sell your business and for how much. So I appreciate Sid bringing that up. But there was a question in there. Mike, did you see that question in there about that particular topic?
I did, John. Let me just scroll up here. Is there anything similar to the QSBS for an asset sale? Because a lot of small business deals seem to be an asset sale versus a stock purchase. So, Sid, do you want to take that?
Yes, so I'm happy to follow up on more information. Yet typically it should be appropriate for both, but I will double check with John and then get back to you. But it's a great question.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, John.
Thanks. And what I'd like to do is kind of open it up to a panel discussion. Again, we'll be monitoring the chat, so we'll address questions. But we want to get through three topics here. And the first one is really where the hierarchy of opportunity is for both sellers and buyers. And this simple image, just want to make a point and then open it up to the panel to talk about this. You know, when we read about acquisitions in the newspaper or Wall Street Journal or your local business, then we always read about, you know, the private equity firm buying this big company for $1 gazillion, and venture capital firm might buy fund an acquisition or something. It's mostly private equity. Private equity bought my company, but that's what private equity firms do. They buy these companies, but you have to be a certain size to even be worth it for a private equity firm to even pop up on their radar screen. And the reality is there's not a lot of companies that reach that level. So it is what it is, right? There's a gazillion companies that are smaller that a private equity firm's never going to buy. And that's the market we're talking about here. It's somebody who started a business or bought one and now is ready to sell it for a variety of reasons. The main part of that reason usually is retirement. So somebody wants to retire finally, right? And they want to figure out how to exit the business. But there's something called the 5 Ds: death, disability, divorce, distress, and disagreement, right? So these 5 Ds, and we didn't coin that. It came from a source I'll talk about a little bit later. But it's quite common that opportunity presents itself because the owner is experiencing one of the 5 Ds. Now, we don't wish that on anybody. I want to be crystal clear on that. But when people are in that situation and they own a business, you're actually doing them a huge favor by participating in the acquisition of that business. You're actually doing them a favor. They're doing you a favor. And that's the reality of the world. That's how a lot of companies are made available for sale, or why business owners decide to sell. And that's the reality few people talk about, but it is what it is. But more commonly, someone just wants to retire and monetize this thing they've worked so hard for. Then there's a whole bunch of businesses where there's not even a thought of a sale, and that's fine. And that's the majority of businesses. You know, if somebody's just deep into it, they love it, aren't even thinking about exiting the business. That's fine. There's a lot of those businesses. So the market we're talking about here for this group, the market of opportunity, is really in the middle. And want to kind of open it up now for discussion amongst the panel. Folks, do you got any, John M., maybe you can address that, because I think maybe, you know, it'd be interesting to hear how you got into your HVAC business. But any comments on that, John M.? We'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, John. I mean, to kind of start, and I was thinking about this as Shim was speaking about kind of the different revenue groupings that JP Morgan works with. You know, when it comes to this pyramid and private equity, you know, a term that gets used a lot is, you know, what is middle market, what is lower middle market, what is Main Street. And throughout this whole process, there's kind of a learning a new language. And, you know, oftentimes people use things interchangeably. But for my own path, you know, I was looking at both brokered businesses where the seller has intentionally reached out to a business broker to list their business for sale, as well as reaching out directly to owners who either hadn't actively thought about a sale or just hadn't listed a broker. And when it comes to the 5 Ds and what people might call a proprietary search, where you're reaching out directly to business owners, that's definitely a path for people who are trying to form a relationship with owners, or, you know, catch them at a time where it's heavily on their mind and you're calling them at the right time. But for many of these businesses that are brokered deals and kind of the lower middle market, that is the path I was going down. And one of the benefits to that is the seller has made a commitment to sell the business, because there's often issues in terms of timeline with either the seller, you know, not finding the exit that they'd like, or not realizing that it's a very long process. So when it comes to that middle grouping of operating versus ready to retire 5 Ds, it's definitely something to think about, whether you want to be solely focused on brokered deals, solely reaching out to the business owners themselves directly, or a mix of both.
Yeah, great insight, John. Thanks for that. Anyone else on the panel care to address this?
Yeah, I'll talk about it, John. I acquired my company through divorce proceedings. The couple
Yours
that
or the
owned-
owners?
uh, the sellers.
Oh, got it. Keep going.
So the company was owned by a guy. He got divorced. Part of the divorce proceedings were the wife received the company. She really wasn't interested in the company. She was only interested in the revenue related to the company. And so the company continued a downward spiral until she was ready for someone to come along and help her out, as John mentioned. And because I acquired the company through a divorce, I was also able to secure owner financing. I bought the company without using my own money, and the sellers financed the sale of the company with me making payments to them. And at some point, not too far into that payment schedule, the owner said, "Hey, I really need money now. Can you pay me off?" And my answer was yes, but we're going to have a discounted rate. So we discounted the rate associated with those payment terms. So that's number one. Number two, BizBuySell or BizQuest are not the only place to find businesses for sale. I'm a big believer in talking to bankers and chambers of commerce, because bankers and chambers of commerce know when businesses are either for sale, or need to be sold. And if you could go talk to your chamber of commerce and give them an idea of what you might be looking for, they may be able to help you introduce you into a company that is for sale. And that company is probably already doing banking, and you can go talk to those bankers. Of course, there's proprietary information, client privilege information that you have to deal with, but you could get a lot of valuable information from a banker, and maybe your existing banker, or from your chamber of commerce. So to me, the big issue is figuring out what it is that you want to do. Try to narrow down your search to what kind of a commercial enterprise that you're looking for, because there are lots of companies out there for sale. It's just that the sellers are not really on the mark right now to sell them. But with the right opportunity, I think you'll find more companies for sale than you really think about. Thank you, John.
Great points, Mike. I would also say that there's an old adage out there that every small business is for sale every day. I think when you talk to small business owners, me included, when I owned my first one, I would always take a call by somebody who was kicking the tires to try to buy us. It's just the way it is. Not that you hate the company or anything. It's just like when you own something, you're always going to listen to what someone has to say. So it's actually not that hard to go out and try to find these. Dave's asking a good question about how do you find broker dealers for the 5Ds that John just mentioned is his question. Great question, Dave. I often say, and there's nothing wrong with business brokers, but one of the unknowns out there is like there's no like law or regulation that says this is how you must sell a company. Some states require a real estate license, believe it or not. But other than that, there's no like set regulation like there is in the securities or banking world. So we've got this system we'll go over in a few minutes that is commonly accepted process, but doesn't have to be that way. 2 points about that. Number one, most sellers, when they go to sell their business, no matter how long they've been in business, it's the first time they've ever experienced the process too. even though they've owned the business, they're as new to the process as the buyer is oftentimes if it's a first-time buyer. So there's one of the reasons Pass the Guidon exists is to educate sellers. So it's a process of understanding how it works and how you go through that. But Dave, probably a best practice is, and Vet the CEO, we work with a lot of veterans getting out. And one of the tricks that always seems to work when somebody wants to go down the acquisition path is this. We tell this person, tell him or her to actually make a list of 10 companies in their area that they might want to buy, that they like. And then they make the list, and then they go out and we tell them, hey, go out there and literally walk in or call them or whatever and try to contact the owner and ask, tell them you're a veteran, play the veteran card, and see if they'd be interested and have ever thought of selling the business. And every time we recommend somebody does that, they quickly come back and says, I can't believe it, but I like my third or fourth try, somebody was really willing and eager to talk to me. And it works all the time. And it's a really tactical guerrilla way to find those 5 Ds. And you never know. It's all a matter of timing when you might walk into a situation where you're actually a breath of fresh air, given what they might be going on in their personal life or what have you. Anybody have anything to add to that?
Yeah, John.
Yeah,
Point.
Shim,
go ahead, Jim.
Okay, really quickly, for the business owners, so one of the questions I always ask companies that I talk to is, what is your end state? And of course, the answers vary a lot. But the one point I wanted to hit home was, you do not want to be confronted as a business owner with the question of what is your end state during a 5D incident. Like, the trigger for you to think about your end state should not be the 5Ds when it occurs, because by then you're already far behind the power curve. It takes a long time to exit, possibly, a couple years to really set the stage correct to really exit. So I just want to, for all the business owners out there, think through what is your end state. Even if it's a very vague starting process, at least you have some kind of North Star to guide your process.
Great point, Shim. Thank you for that. Sid, I think it was you. Did you have a point?
No, it was me and my big mouth. John,
Okay.
you remember when we were putting the offer together for All About Blinds, one of the options we put in there was a lower selling price we were asking for. And there was a mix between, I'll give you this much cash up front, and then the rest of it is owner financing. And so we shaped that with the sellers. Now they wanted their money, they're older people. And that's another point when you're looking to buy a business. If it's somebody in their 70s, they probably aren't going to sign up for a 30-year note between you and them and you pay them every month. They want their cash and ride off into the sunset. So those things factor in, but I wouldn't know anything about that when I was making an offer to buy the biz. But you and I had talked about that, and I actually made 2 offers to them. One was part owner financing. The other one was, here's a full check, ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, great point. And lots to unpack there. I mean, there's a tactic of providing more than one offer, like Rob described, a little trick of the trade there. But you're right. I mean, when you start, getting as old as, I don't know, some on this thing, I won't mention any names, but your sensitivity to waiting for money changes, and you got to factor that in. Thanks for that, Rob. I do want to point out Gilbert's question because it's a great one, and this is going to be for Shim or Sid. I'll let you take this one, but he's been noticing that some of the sellers who are in those 5Ds, like pick one, it doesn't really matter. Oftentimes there's a time factor, like they're kind of in a hurry to get a deal done. And oftentimes, I'm paraphrasing what he's saying there. Oftentimes it seems like forever to get like an SBA loan done to someone not in a bank. Can you address that? Like what can help with that, the speed issue, and trying to get your ducks in a row so that when you go to a bank for an acquisition loan, it doesn't take forever?
Yeah, I can take that, John. I think it depends. So on the one side, you have an SBA loan, which essentially think of it as like a VA loan for your mortgage. There's another tier to kind of bypass before you're able to get that loan. So it's similarly in that same vein. For an SBA loan, you have to bypass the standards for SBA to be eligible for that. So it's an extra step, which is why it tends to take longer. Other types of loans can be conventional financing. So conventional financing is based on the cash flow of the business. It's based on the balance sheet of the business, and based on typically, past performance of the business, as well as ability to pay in the future. That can be slightly faster than an SBA loan, typically closing in about a month, I'd say. And probably the faster option is seller financing. That one is, of course, non-bank financing. That's between the buyer and the seller, but your terms can be arranged between those two parties, and that can probably be the fastest option if time really is a constraint.
Yeah, great stuff, Shim, and you're absolutely right. Tons of, I think at that point, not that we're taking advantage of that situation, but oftentimes to get it done quick, seller financing can be the quickest thing. And to your point, is better than shutting it down. And oftentimes something there. So great points.
And what I will say too is, for the buyer, sometimes it's helpful to have a bank look at the financials of the company for another perspective on actually how good the company is. If you do offer seller financing and it's not through a bank, then you take on the additional risk of taking the seller for their word of what their finances are and not having a third party vet that. So there is additional risk associated with seller financing, but on the pro side, you can probably close a deal faster.
Yeah, where I grew up in New England, if you're Italian, you got good policies on how to police that, but I won't go there. But Sid, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Shim put it so perfectly. The only thing that I would add is that I think the duration of a relationship that you have with a banking institution matters. So to the extent your business does not have that relationship now, you should initiate that, because I think the longer you spend in developing that personal connectivity with your banker, I think that really helps in expediting and navigating that internal process within the banking institution.
Yeah, great stuff. Appreciate it. Let's go on to the next one. And this is relating to military service. And it's kind of a recent aha moment I've had. Mike Horn and I co-founded Vet the CEO. We've helped over 7,000 people through that program over the last 11 years. And I can't speak for Mike, but I know our thinking's changed dramatically, having been part of that 11-year experience and dealing with a lot of opinions and attitudes of fellow veterans that are transitioning out and go down the entrepreneurial path just at large scale. And one of the things that always intrigued me was, this kind of correlation between military service and what am I going to do when I get out? Like, I used to jump out of airplanes behind light tanks. Like, there's no correlation there. Mike was an mechanized infantry man. Like, so what do you do when you get out? You probably many of you who are veterans, like, what the heck am I going to do? Right. Well, if you look at military service, it does break down into two things, tangibles and intangibles. And on the tangible side of military service, it's the thing you did in the military. It's whatever branch you were in. It's whatever specialty you had. And, that is your tangible expertise when you join the military. You end up doing something in some branch to contribute to the defense of the nation. That usually doesn't, in many cases, doesn't have any correlation to the outside world, right? That's what we struggle with. However, on the other side is intangibles. Nobody spends more than the United States government and the taxpayer developing leaders than the Department of Defense. No corporation, nothing. So when you're in your young 20s or mid 20s or into your 30s, you become an NCO or an officer, you have responsibilities that you can't really compare in the outside world. And you practice leadership, you practice decision-making. So, I'm amazed that when, like, I work with people just getting out now, they're like supercomputers on two legs. Like, decision-making is ingrained in their DNA. And the ones that succeeded as leaders, and it's not everybody, folks, but the ones that have, they just have it in their DNA. And folks, that's the tough stuff in the civilian world. And that's the intangibles. Well, when you look at a business, you break it down into two pieces too. The tangibles are usually what you see on the balance sheet. And it's the stuff you can see. It's the inventory. It's the office furniture. It's the trucks. It's the building. And a lot of emphasis when you go to buy a company is on the tangibles, right? But what makes or breaks a company's success is clearly on the intangible side. And that's where the correlation occurs. So if you're a veteran, even if you jumped out airplanes behind tanks, doesn't matter. You're super strong in the intangibles, and that should give us all as veterans confidence that small business leadership is something that we can succeed at, and we can learn the tangibles. There is something called goodwill in the banking world, which is the difference between the intangibles and tangibles you might find on the balance sheet. For all you people that are going to pick at me with saying there isn't such a thing. But anyway, other than that, that usually represents the value of the intangibles in a business. But I just want to throw this out to the panel to comment on, given your own personal experiences and what your thoughts are and advice to fellow veterans who are thinking about acquiring businesses when they think about their military service and the decision to buy a business. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can jump in, John. Go ahead, Mike.
Rob.
Well,
right.
I would relate it directly to military service, John. When I joined a new unit, my job was to go make that unit better than it was before. That's what I was supposed to do, or it's what I thought I was supposed to do. And so that all falls mostly on the intangible side. And when you get into business, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to work on these intangible things all the time to make them better. And in my company's case, we didn't have established systems or infrastructure. And so I had to create that. And I had to talk to other business owners and say, how do you do this? And they gave me their advice, and then I did what I wanted to do. What I did have when I bought the company was an existing team. And I looked at the team and evaluated the team, and they were all good guys and they knew what they were doing. And so I knew that was going to go okay. The customer relationships were good in the business that I acquired too. They had a lot of customers, and those customers came back. And the brand, it was a well-known brand, but it had a reputation for being very expensive. And so we had to overcome that reputation of being very expensive, and it's taken a long time to do that. So you're exactly right, John. When I first looked at the company, I focused on the tangibles because we have these big pieces of manufacturing equipment. We had vehicles out in the yard. We had all of these expensive tools, and that's the stuff that I kind of focused on. But that intangible stuff was just as important as the tangibles. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Mike. Rob, you had something to add?
Yeah. I think we focus a lot on the intangibles. I think maybe a little too much. Now we've got that. I've got that piece down. I can do all that stuff, but the tangibles, we don't really mess with much in the military. Those things like money and cash flow and all those things that are really important, the lifeblood of a business, the financials. So we tend to kind of drift away from that and think that the intangibles will carry the day. And that's not true. You got to balance them both. Last piece I'll add is leadership is influence. Simple as that. And you're influencing customers to spend money in your organization. And so we focus heavily on relationships, empathizing with our customers, having a sense of what they're going through, because many of them are doing home improvements, buying new homes, things like that. Get them to yes. Are they happy? It's not an absolute. There are some customers you just can't please, but that relationship stuff is massive. And in this home improvement space, I'll be critical. They suck at it because they don't answer phone calls and emails, and they're so busy they can ride this wave of business and not do that. We know that at some point in time, when some of this stuff dries up, if we have relationships established, they will spend the money with us.
Great stuff. Thanks, Rob. John M., anything to add to this topic? Because you've kind of taken the journey and looked at a business.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with all the comments about the military leadership skills that contribute to the intangible part. And I certainly think about that every day, especially as a non-technical person in the HVAC industry. So similar to being a platoon commander, I view my role as to create an environment where these technical experts can thrive and lead their teams. So just like my NCO team leaders were able to, get unleashed to do their job, I think about that with my HVAC technicians, because I'll go out, and when I'm in the field with them, my only, use is handing them their tools. So I'm not, able to pick up that side of the business without them. And, very common question people will ask is, well, is this a great purchase price for the business? So kind of calling up to the value driver title of this slide, this slide describes how both a buyer can think about the purchase price of a business and how the seller can think about how to improve their purchase price or what might be dragging their purchase price down. So an interesting part of all of these aspects, unlike real estate, where there's kind of an objective source of truth about square footage and everything else, is that there's going to be a natural tension looking at it from the seller perspective and the buyer's perspective of, well, what is actually the financials? Going back to learning a new language, you'll hear the term seller discretionary earnings, cash flow, EBITDA. What does that person mean when they say EBITDA versus what I think EBITDA means? And how do we look at the last couple of years of financials to, kind of come to an agreement on what that value stream is that, if I didn't change anything, would continue if the seller was replaced perfectly. And then the intangible relates to the multiple that you're paying. So a lot of people will ask about, well, is this a fair multiple of earnings to pay for this business? And one of the ways you can view the multiple is an assessment of risk. So if those intangibles are shaky, so for example, if they have a very small team and there's a lot of key man risk, or if the systems are not in place, so if the owner steps away, the whole organization grinds to a halt, that is a riskier business to step into. So therefore, the multiple would be lower than kind of the classic, the owner, works on the business as opposed to in the business, can step away for vacation, which might command a high multiple fairly. So I see some comments about DSCR and everything else. And so when you're coming up with the purchase price to assess it, you're thinking about how the tangibles are viewed, and then what the multiple is based on your risk assessment of that value stream continuing. And it's definitely the gamesmanship and the difficulty of this process, and is one of the reasons I was so thankful to have both mentors and professional service partners along the way, because they have pattern recognition and have seen this hundreds of times, whereas me as a first-time buyer, especially one that was very interested in buying a company quickly, came with my own biases or kind of like naivete just from not getting a lot of reps in, but people do for a living. So it's one of the reasons why I so strongly encourage people to build a trusted team who can help you navigate all these issues and more that are listed out on this slide.
Yeah, that's great, John. And thank you very much. And I'd like to add to what you said. If you're a seller looking at this slide, to your point that you made, you have to assess how strong your intangibles are, because that's where you're going to get your multiple, particularly the brand issue, I would say, that Mike spoke about a little bit. So just this is a kind of a model we can all think about as either a buyer or a seller, and think about it in terms of how it factors into our decision to buy a particular company that we might be interested in, or if we're selling, how much is our company really worth? The third slide is just a process slide. This is like 100,000-foot look at the process. Most of the time, it involves going through a couple of gates. One is the letter of intent. That's usually a non-binding letter of intent, where the buyer delivers a document called a letter of intent that has an offer price and a couple other parameters and kind of a list of stuff that the buyer wants to look at. The seller then accepts that letter of intent and then usually takes the business off the market for a period of time. That's one of the things they're agreeing to in the letter of intent. During that time, that's when the roll your sleeves up times take place. This could be anywhere from 1 to many, many months, right, Rob? So this is the due diligence phase, where you're looking at everything regarding the business, and you might bring in some people to help you do that. And this is also the period of time where you're trying to figure out your financing strategy, working with a bank, figuring out, can you get a loan or not? If not, where else can you get money from? And how you're going to put a financing strategy together. Usually that happens concurrently. And if you can successfully complete that, everything still looks good. Then a formal purchase and sale agreement is drafted, usually by an attorney, where the final offer is made. This is a binding offer. And usually there's adjustments made to whatever was presented in the letter of intent based on what you find out during due diligence. And then a formal purchase and sale agreement is signed, just like you do when you buy a house. And then a closing is scheduled and everything happens. Lawyers write it all up. And then after the closing, that's when the transition process starts. Oftentimes, sellers will hang out for a period of weeks or months or years even to help the new owner. Particularly, we envision, as when veterans sell their business to another veteran, usually that's a pretty smooth process and collegial process. Other times, sellers just want to go retire in Florida and get out of town as soon as the closing's over. So those are 4 steps. We're not going to get into this in any more detail than that. I am going to ask my banking friends here for just a quick tip on that second stage and from their experience, any food for thought there. But one of the things that that Pastor Guidon is bringing to the community is a more formal program to learn this process. And I'll get that to get to that in a minute. But Shim or Sid, any comments on some of, like, what are the top 1 or 2 things you got to make sure that you do well and right and know you have in that second phase if you're going to go after a bank loan?
Yeah, I think the perspective is different from the seller versus the buyer, right? So in terms of the transaction and how you finance it, typically the buyer will finance it through a combination of debt and equity financing. I do encourage buyers to look at debt financing. It does tend to be cheaper compared to equity financing, and also you can retain more control of your business. So I think it's definitely worth a look. I think your previous framework too, John, of the tangibles versus the intangibles, it's a very similar framework from a bank underwriting perspective, where the tangibles, the financial statements, is almost the prerequisite to even be considered for a loan. And then the intangibles there are indicative of kind of future performance and how well the company can continue growing or continue performing. From a bank's perspective, what we don't want to do is overburden a company, right? Give them too much debt. The debt repayment schedule is too difficult to repay for the company. So we are also looking out for the benefit of the company. I know there can be some angst when it comes to looking at different bank financings, but a big concern of ours is to make sure the leverage ratio from debt to EBITDA is sufficient for the company in terms of the fixed charges with interest and the other fixed payments, that it's not overburdening the company as well. I think one other thing to consider too, John, from a procedural standpoint, is quality of financials. Are the financials company prepared? Are they reviewed? Are they audited by a CPA firm? Essentially, the quality of a financial statement, if they are reviewed or if they are audited, it's a certification by a third-party CPA firm. So from a bank's perspective, that's much more, it's much more vetted, much more verified, and kind of a stronger position to negotiate for financing. So a couple quick hits there, John.
I couldn't agree with you more on that second one. Big time. Sid, anything to add?
Yeah, Shim described it perfectly. I would say that one additional consideration, if you're coming in, and I think John kind of referenced this or alluded to it, which is if you're coming in in a partnership, making sure you have ground rules kind of established in the event that one of the individuals steps aside or is no longer working. What is the course of action to ensure that that company is continuing to operate? I would say on the private banking side, there are insurance options that can be leveraged called last man insurance or last person insurance that can be used as a mitigating factor to help navigate a period where you have one co-founder who drops or goes through a divorce. So just know that there are other solutions that you can have to be able to navigate complex situations like that. Thanks.
Great stuff, Sid. So folks, just to wrap it up for today, we could be here for hours. There's so much to talk about, but a couple things to know about Pass the Guidon. We're a new program under Vet the CEO. It's a nonprofit. Vet the CEO has two programs. One's an accelerator program we do at Warrior Rising, and Pass the Guidon is our newer one. And our focus and our mission is to create a forum that's friendly to sellers and buyers, and particularly for buyers that are military veterans looking to buy businesses. We want to be a resource for you. And for sellers, you don't have to be a veteran, but if you're interested in working with a veteran on an acquisition because you want to exit your company for whatever reason, we want to be a good resource for you. The biggest thing I'd like to encourage all of you to do who are here live or watching the recording is download the app. Go to our website, passtheguidon.org. We have an app. Get it on Android or Apple, and get the app, become part of the community, and create a profile on there, and start to interact with others, and trust the app for updates, new information, and collaboration as a community. We are going to be starting regional conferences. This inaugural launch event, we wanted to be virtual, so there was no limitation in terms of geography. We're happy with the way things turned out, but look for regional face-to-face events and networking opportunities. In Q1 of next year, we will have a 3-week online program, cohort-based, that Vet the CEO will deliver, that educates sellers and buyers on the process that I just went over in a lot more detail, and provides a forum for you to hear from other experts and continuously learn what the process is. And we're always looking for sponsors, and more importantly, mission-aligned organizations like John M's. That's how I got to know him. There's a few out there. A couple of them are participating as attendees today. Glad to see you here. Look, this is a team sport, and we all want to jump in here and put an asset in place that buyers and sellers can utilize in order to achieve their dreams, whether they're buyers or sellers. If you got any questions whatsoever, that's our generic email. Send us an email message, and we will make sure we get an answer for you. We may have missed a question, but thank you. We're not done yet. I'm going to turn it over to my co-founder, Mike Horn. Mike, pick up the pieces on anything I dropped and close us out.
Well, I just wanted to go over a couple of questions that are in there, John. Number one, John M., how did you get into linking veterans with business sellers?
Real quick, John.
Well, I think that this is an amazing community of veterans who have found ETA, and there definitely is a team spirit to it. And, I certainly benefited from many other veterans pointing me in the right direction to business owners, and have veterans as investors in my efforts. So I'm certainly glad to return the favor. And I saw that there was a mention of contact info in our bios, and would very much encourage and welcome people to reach out, because this is a difficult process to navigate, and would be glad to be helpful any way I can to any veteran who's looking to take this path.
Perfect. Thank you, John. So I'd like to remind everyone that small business ownership, entrepreneurship is about lifelong learning. Learning is very important, and attending events like this is one of the ways that we gather information. So please reach out to us at the inquiry@passtheguidon.org email address, or each of our bios includes an email address for us. So if you want to reach out to us individually, you can contact us or that way, or you could send an email to inquiry@passtheguidon, and we will forward it on to the appropriate person. So with that, John, thanks everyone, and I'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks. And I want to thank my panelists for making the time. You guys really made the whole thing happen. I really appreciate it personally. And you're all fellow veterans as well. I really appreciate that too. And have a great day, everybody. Thank you.